What's up, guys? I'm back. I'm gonna do a quick video tonight. I'm gonna show you guys something that I used to do when I was younger. Um, got a little small story behind it real quick, and just gonna do one rig on this video. I've been trying to get a little bit more structure into these videos. Some of these ones have turned into just basically my rant. Like I'm ranting about some fishing. I get off topic too much, so I'm gonna try to stay a little bit more focused this time, guys. All right. So what I'm gonna show you is a rig that I'm. It's basically just a bobber setup. It is for larger fish though. It's a tactic I used to use for bass a lot. I've used it for some walleye before. When I was younger, we called it bobber dogging, but since I have moved to the Pacific Northwest, I realized that they have names for that they call bobber dogging something different. So I'm going to refer to it as bobber dogging in this video because that's what I learned it as when I was younger. So just keep that in mind that, like I said in a few of my other videos, a lot of the rigs that you will look up throughout, for any type of fishing, some of these rigs have the exact same name as other rigs do. So just keep that in mind when you're looking something up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you bobber dogging. Jacob, the guy who I initially started doing some of these videos for, moved to Texas. He just got into bass fishing, and today he actually posted on the one of the fishing apps that we use. He actually caught his first bass today. So congratulations, Jacob. Told you you'd get it. Now the hard part starts. It basically turns into a lifetime addiction. So yeah, welcome to the club. Anyway, Jacob called me earlier this week and he said that as he was fishing, he wasn't getting any bites, and he noticed that the bass seemed to be jumping out of the water in front of him. So it has been my experience when bass fishing, there are only two times that I ever really see bass breach. One of them is when they're hooked or scared. The other time is that when they're chasing fast bait fish. I'm sure there's probably people who have seen it for other times, for whatever. But generally, the way I see it is a scared bass or a hooked bass, which would be scared at the same way. Anyway, it's fighting. They will breach. They will come out of the water. They will flop. They will flip. They will try to shake a hook or try to escape a predator that's chasing them. So. The other reason, like I said, is when they're chasing very fast bait fish, like shad or sun perch, the little rainbow colored bluegill looking fish, or bluegills, red eared baby crappies, maybe some trout, any kind of bait fish or something that they're after. I have seen them come out of the water completely chasing these fish before because those fish are very small. They're very darty. They can change direction way faster than the bass. So rather than slow down and not breach, they may lose the fish if they do that. So they will just continue to thrust through the attack, and sometimes they will come out of the water. So I had a suspicion that that was probably the case where he was at because today when he told me he caught that fish, which actually sort of verified my initial thought on it was. He was pulling a crankbait, and it is a red belly bluegill crankbait that he caught this bass on. So this just sort of confirmed my thought for me. I mean, there may have been other reasons. Who knows? So my assumption was that they were chasing bait fish, bluegills, shad, sun perch, small fish, little guys. They're very fast, much faster than the bass. So what he did later on, after he caught this bass, he sent me a picture of a small sun perch. It was about this big. I didn't know what species it was. He sent me a picture and asked me what it was. So I told him, it's basically just a perch. It's similar to bluegill. I'm sure there's a million different scientific names for them. I always call them sun perches. So I had before I could send him the message back to tell him to rig up a bobber dog setup, he had already released it. So in waters where they are chasing bait fish like this would go into the situation that I had discussed in some of my previous videos. When you come into an area and you're going to fish, evaluate the area that you're in. If there's a ton of frogs, if there's a ton of little tiny bait fish swimming around, sometimes you may go up to some backwater pond or something out in the middle of nowhere, and there's rodents, running around. Just evaluate the area. See what the see what the is available for the fish to eat, and this can help you drastically narrow down, your tactics that you're going to use to find the fish species or target species or whatever it is that you're after. So in this situation, I had recommended that he bobber dog this small perch that he caught, and I'm going to show you how to set this rig up. It's simple. It's basically a live worm rig for bluegill, just on a larger scale. So what I'm going to do is, I'm sure everybody has seen it. Everybody has their reasons for it. Say if you go and you buy a bass hook kit, like wherever, Walmart, Kmart, order it on Amazon, something like that. They come with all the various offset hooks, a few weights, some wide gap hooks, some, things like that. Sometimes some of them will have wacky hooks in them, weedless wacky hooks, or even some of them will have these big hooks like this. I've seen people use these hooks just like you would use a wide gap or an offset hook. They use it in a rubber worm and just have it at like the front half of the worm. I never really did that. I always stuck with the the wide gap or the offset hooks or something like that, or a centering pin hook or something like that when I bass fish. I like my hook to be further down the plastic than right at the tip. So I generally would never use these hooks, unless I would go out and I don't know, bass. I would go catfishing or something, and I would throw these in my box and I'd use these for catfishing. But one of the things that I would do with this is I would set up a bobber dog rig. And the way I do this is, I'm going to show you real quick, and then we'll call it a day. But so, like I said before, I am a huge fan of the Palomar knot. So generally, it is my go-to. Unless I'm tying up a leader, I'm probably using the Palomar knot. So I'm just going to tie this hook up real fast. If I could hold onto this string, double the line over through the eyelet, just like in all the other videos. Or if you can't really see what I'm doing, you can always look up a chart online. They're available everywhere, and you'll see a breakdown illustration of how to do it. So doubled over line put through the eyelet, tie your half hitch with the doubled over line. Then your terminal gear is going to go through the eyelet of the half hitch knot back over to the end. Then you are going to make sure that your tag line and your main line are both through the eyelet of the doubled over half hitch. Then, like I said, this is here is mono line, so the enemy of mono is heat. We talked about this already. Gonna get it wet, cinch it down, and there we go. That is our Palomar knot. One of the things I like to keep an eye out whenever I'm tying a Palomar with the mono line, as I just said, heat is the enemy of mono. A lot of times if you tie this knot and then you look at it, if it's all curly queued up, looks like a bow, or like a, some lace that's been wrapped around a present or something, and it has those little curly ends on them, generally that could be an indication that your line was heated. It'll curl up when it gets hot. So, but then again, if you do this knot with heavy mono, heavier filament line, it will curl up almost every time and still be strong. But anyway, we got it there. Tag end line's there, main line's there. Clip off your tag line. I would have used my clippers, guys. This is bad for your teeth to bite it, but I didn't grab my clippers before I started this. Okay, so we have the main line, Palomar knot, larger size hook. I'm not sure what the size is. I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention. So what I'm going to do here is, I don't have a real fish to show you, but I do have a swim bait that is a bluegill. It's a small bluegill or perch, whatever you want to call it. The striping indicates to me that it's a perch. So if you were in one of these areas and you just happen to catch a little bait size bluegill or sunfish, perch, whatever the species is, first of all, make sure that the area that you are fishing in, you are allowed to use live bait caught from the area where you're fishing, because it is not the case everywhere you go. As a lot of people from Washington will know this, that just because you catch it doesn't mean you get to use it for bait. Especially if it's a protected species, or like a salmon fry or something like that. Don't be using them for bait, guys. You will get in trouble if you get caught. But anyway, so what you do is you would take this live fish, and what you want to do is you want to make it look like a wounded fish in the water, and you want it to stay alive for as long as you can. All right, so you're going to hold this fish up and if you see this dorsal fin right here, see that? I'm sure you can see it. You're gonna take your hook and just below that dorsal fin with enough, where there's enough, meat to not hit any vital organs or swim bladders or anything like that. You don't want to, delve this hook into the central nervous system, because the fish will be paralyzed and it will die pretty quick. You want it to stay alive and swim around and struggle. Sounds like a mean thing, but this is nature, guys. So just below the dorsal fin, just enough meat for it to be securely hooked without injuring the fish. You would run this hook through just like that. See? Now granted, the live fish isn't going to have a treble hook dangling from the bottom of it, nor a larger hook coming out of the top. This would be how you would hook this. All right, this fish will be perfectly alive still. It will still be able to swim around, and it will still be able to stay alive and flow water through its gills, so it'll be able to stay alive for a while. Then what you're going to do after you have that, or before, however you decide to set it up, you're going to want to select your depth. If this is it, generally if I'm in deeper water, I'll go about a foot, maybe a foot and a half, 2 feet even, depending on what the structure or the contour of the water is or in the area around me. Bobber. This is just a cheapo. Grabbed a bag the other day so I could do this video. This one is push the top down, little tang comes out the bottom. You would double wrap that, flip the white part to the top, put your finger over the tang on the bottom, push down the top, and as long as you keep your finger over the bottom, you'll see a tang come out the top. You will single wrap this one. There you go. You got a float. Now, depending on the size of the bait fish that you're using, I have actually done some very, very large bait fish on these before. I remember fishing in Okefenokee area when I was younger, and we were using full-size bluegill. This is not going to keep, stay above the water with a full-size bluegill trying to fight away from that. So, when I was younger, we would do like this. Take a bottle, peel the plastic label off, tighten it up, make sure it's really tight. You would wrap your line, around this piece. Tie a slip knot on there. Once you slip it down, cinch it tight. Tie a clenching knot at the end of the slip knot so it doesn't slide off. Make sure you secure this bottle, folks. And if the bottle gets away from you, and you can, clean up your trash. All right. It sucks. There's plastic on every surface of this planet, and it's kind of disgusts me when I'm 40 miles away from the nearest person and there's a plastic bottle sitting next to me by the river. So clean up after yourself. But as I was saying, you're going to need to use a float that is proportionate to the size of your bait and the size of the fish that you're after. If you're after a 10, 12 pound, largemouth bass that's going to suck down a half-pound bluegill, you're going to want a big float. All right. I've even had times where we had 2-liter bottles tied to these things, and it's on a fishing pole too. So you put it out there, and you'll see the float, whatever your float you're using, dancing around all the time. So you just kind of got to gauge how much your bait fish moves your float around as you put it out there. Keep that in mind. So when you look out there the next time, and let's say you have a float this size out there and it's gone, obviously your bluegill's not taking that size float under the water. So whatever has eaten your bluegill is taking off with it, and generally you're going to know anyway. So this was the rig. This rig that I just showed you. I referred to it as bobber dogging when I was younger. As I said, when I moved to the Pacific Northwest, bobber dogging is something completely different. It's actually a tactic used for steelhead, salmon, migratory trout and trout species, and it involves a floating fly tied tandem to a subsurface fly underneath it, and there's not actually even a bobber involved in it. You're just using a floating fly tied to a subsurface one. I looked it up one time, watched a video. They called it bobber dogging. This is what I call bobber dogging. So call it whatever you want. It's just basically a float rig using whatever bait you catch in the area that you're fishing. I used to use bluegill. I've used sunfish, some little sucker fish sometimes. I've even been pulling, you know, a spinner bait, a small spinner, like blade spinner, through some brush, and had a small crappie grab a hold of it, you know, and it was a fatal hook, you know, like a gill torm or something like that. Well, that fish is going to die. So just went ahead and used it, tried it out. I've caught lots of fish from it. I've even caught catfish doing it, especially in the springtime when you're fishing in the river and the river's rising. Catfish are active. You could catch catfish doing this, but try it if you want. Jacob, congratulations on your bass. If you get another opportunity with the sun perch like you caught, I would try this out, man. It is a good way to find the bucket mouth that is not going for your crankbait, because, you know, if they're chasing around fish like this and eating, you know, they may just go for the one that looks like it's wounded near the surface of the water. Try it out. Y'all have a nice day. Tight lines all. Later.